You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo or honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker out there, you can try spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. Listen, I'm going to dare you to do it. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs that you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and then grab a few more napkins and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's.
What's up, Cal fans? We got a new segment for you. I'm very excited about it. It's called Friend of the Pod. And if you're listening, this is Golden Bearcast, proud partner of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. And for our debut episode, because we figured that our listeners might be a little bit tired of hearing Rob and I say the same thing over and over and over, we're bringing on an OG friend of the pod who's been on the pod before, but it's been a few years, who goes by the name of Josh Yuen. Josh, what's up, bud? How you doing?
What's going on, fellas? Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. Well, Josh, do you want to give a little bit of a background? I mean, I'm very curious because I actually have known you for a few years, but I don't actually know how your Cal history goes. And I am quite curious to understand what your Cal football story is.
Yeah, off the dome, first of all, I don't think anybody gets tired of listening to you guys. There was a stretch of my Cal football experience where from 2019 to 2022, I was falling asleep listening to you guys. So just want to preface that these guys, I mean, ups and downs of this program, they're there not just every Saturday, but day in and day out all year round. So, the tail end of that experience was, by my, attended Cal 2016 to 2020, but, fellow listeners out there, grew up in the Cal family. Both my parents attended the University of California back in the 70s and 80s. So, was born in 1998, and really my first taste of Cal football was the Tedford era. At least when we were making bowl games, 2004, 2009 consistently. And I think we'll talk about, where we go from here in terms of how do we get back to just getting a freaking 8-4 season on the dock. But, got to experience, Job and Best was my favorite player in 2008-9. And, growing up in sort of the Goff era and, the ins and outs of what we dealt with, the Dykes to Wilcox transition, had the privilege of working at the Daily California during my time at Cal. Was a sports editor, the editor-in-chief. Got to experience, the connections of not just the football program, but the beat writers. Saw Rob and yourself, Andy, at practices. And, lately over the past few years, I've transitioned full-time career into the baseball industry where, to be frank, this year I was not committed to Cal football in any way. I was transitioning, moving out to the East Coast, and literally the only thing that could have pulled me back in was a college game day appearance. And that was I went back on Twitter, I reconnected with my old alumni friends. It was awesome, man. And we'll talk about the ins and outs of finances and Cal football politics and the ins and outs of where the program's at, on this 4-game losing streak. But excited to connect with you guys. Appreciate the chance to be, part of the pod number 1. You guys are doing great.
So my first question on what you just said, Josh, is have you sat in, and I know the answer, but for our listeners, have you sat in on a Wilcox presser before?
I have sat in on a Wilcox press before. Turnover margin, explosive plays. We got to execute better.
Pretty spot on.
That's exactly right. All right. Well, that brings us to our grand question, because I think we have a text thread going. Obviously, nobody can see what's going on in that thread, but this is really where this idea came from. And, I think the big question on a lot of people's mind is, where do we really go from here? Because this does, and I said this, my parents asked me, what was it like being at the Cal game this Saturday? And I said, it's like watching a movie for the 8th time. And you sort of sit back and you're like, how the hell am I watching this? There's no way I'm watching this movie again. I've already seen this movie. but this is the 8th time that you've seen that movie. Having been in the pressers, having seen multiple seasons where there's 3-game losing streaks, sort of every year it seems like we come up against the precipice of what could be. And for one reason or another, whether it's injury or coaching decisions or you name it, we do seem to struggle at sort of grasping the proverbial brass ring. So with that journey and your closeness to that journey, I am very curious. Is it time to make a change?
Yeah, listen. You talk about in terms of like watching the same movie for the 8th time. It's more of like the same movie for the 8th time for 8 years in a row. And what that movie entails is usually a strong start in non-conference play. Wilcox usually goes undefeated or 2-1 or something along those lines, and then gosh, the month of October is becoming like my least favorite month for so many reasons. Not just with the Dodgers and Yankees in the World Series, but every single year, like we just struggle for whatever reason. You can change the conferences, you can change quarterbacks, you can change all sorts of things. And it's the same story year in and year out since, obviously, Sonny had his fair share of like highs and low and, bad lows. But with Justin, it's pretty much status quo. It's, have a strong start to the season, and then October, for whatever reason, the excruciating losses, the frustrating press conferences that you lose to, it looks like he's going to like break the table in half. And I'll give him credit where it's due. Like one of the things that I loved about Justin Wilcox, the first year that we had him in 2017, got off to a strong start, had the big one at North Carolina. 4th game of the year, Sam Darnold against Ross Bowers, number 5 in the nation. We have no business winning that game. And he goes in the presser afterwards after Bowers throws like 4 or 5 picks, and he's like, listen, we expected to win that game. Like, we expected to win that game. That was our expectation. I don't care what, the 5 starts they have. I don't care about, like, they're going to be more talented than us, but we expected to win that game. We believe that we have the strategy and the personnel and the game plan for that. And I just love that about Justin Wilcox from the get-go is because the man is married to football. All the linebackers he's had, like, have truly like, that's been the consistent thing with him is that there's no doubt about the passion and the characters that he has in this program. But as you said, bottom line, it's the same movie, every single October for 8 years in a row. And in baseball, throwing an analogy in my career a little bit, building a sustainable winner involves building a scouting and player development pipeline where you're able to compete for championships year in and year out. It's a little bit more nuanced with the college football ranks in terms of, your players are going to change and the landscape is changing. Heck, conferences change every few years now. It's going to be a little bit harder to have the same foundational players. But as the head coach, it's your job to build a program where you're getting to 8 wins every single year. And to be quite frank, on average, if you're going to win 8 games a year, sometimes you'll win 7, sometimes you'll win 9. Over the course of 5 to 10 years, you will play in a conference title game. And I know that's an analogy that people don't want to hear in terms of like, oh, like we're tired of this. Like, why are we waiting around? Like, if you're able to get into the point where I'm not asking for, some of my buddies in the Cal football landscape are like, oh, there's a 12-team playoff. We're going to make the college football playoff. Like, no, like, let's just shoot for 8-4. 8-4, last time we were 8-4, I was in elementary school. I was in Little League, and now I'm the coordinator of amateur scouting for a baseball team. Like, it has been 15 years, and I think that the chances that we've given Justin Wilcox, going back to your original question, have been exhaustive. And there's politics and finances and different things that will probably disallow us from making a significant change in terms of leadership, whether it's the head coach or whatnot. But at this point, the ability to go 8-4 is the expectation, and it's different. And folks tend to find a successful season in different ways, whether it's a bowl game or it's a bowl game plus a win against Stanford. Like, the expectation, truly year in and year out, should be over a period of time, 8 games a year. We should be competing for. And I got so excited this year because I really believe 8-4 was, in the cards this year. And what we have to do to go 8-4 this year? Win out. So long way of answering. Listen, there's going to be a lot of moving parts in terms of Justin Wilcox and the finances and the logistics there. But the expectation should be under him to get to 8 wins more consistently moving forward. And that starts with the head coach and the issues he's had in October.
Do you think that Wilcox is capable of getting this team to 8?
That's the question. That's the multi-million-dollar question that I think you see that the pieces are there. The expectation against USC, there's going to be a couple games every year when you're against Clemson, you're against Syracuse on the road, where you're going to lose those games, and it's okay. The issue with the transition now from 2017 to 2024 is these are games that we expect to win. It's a third. You're starting on a 3rd and 20. You're missing a 28-yard field goal. You have to be a little bit more reliable over exciting. We have exciting players. Jaden Knott when he's healthy. Noah Williams can be an All-American. Being able to have a more cohesive team that is less about the exciting and just a little bit more reliable. That's the difference between right now and, quite frankly, 5-2 over 3-4. I get that a lot of folks feel that we should be 7-0, but there's just a lot of different things across the course of the game, and it's as much as like it feels like it in the moment, it never comes down to the field goal kicker. To answer your question, it's been 7-8 years. I personally am pretty out on that train. You have to, like I said, to be successful and to luck into a conference title game every year. Arizona State, and Colorado were awful in the Pac-12 for several years, and they made a conference title because they lucked into it. At this point, we should have lucked into one or two, especially with the talent that we've had. So that's sort of where my head's at.
Rob, your thoughts?
I mean, this is a question that everyone's asking, and a lot of people are asking us for guidance, I guess, to a certain degree. It's rough because, like, Josh, I know you have people you talk to that are, still around the program or in the program. Like, I have people I talk to. Andy has people he talks to, and like, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, the information I get regarding the situation here is we just don't have the money to make this work. And like, that's the cold, hard reality of this is I'm going to walk you through the cold rationale of the finances not working from how I understand it. Our inflow because of TV revenue currently is at 16 million because we're taking less of a share, a 67% share from the ACC. So that's inflow of 16 mil. We're getting an extra 10 mil from Calamoni, but that is going to be reassessed in the 2027-2028 season. So let's just assume that we get 10 more. So we're at 26. I believe Pac-12 prior was, I think, 21 or 22 mil. So when we were with the Pac-12 up until last year. So that's our inflow. Now, here's the outflows that need to be made if we're going to make this move. One is the donors, I don't think, have any confidence that Jim Knowlton is going to make the correct hire in a very, very dire situation of not having us lose any sort of momentum heading into the next era of realignment, which probably happens towards the end of this decade, maybe early 2030. So you have that aspect of it, which also means Jim Knowlton has alienated a lot of old-time donors from investing in the program until he is removed. His removal will cost you about $5 million. That's one outflow. Then you have another, which is Justin Wilcox's buyout, which if we were to buy him out this year, after the season's over, is about $15 million. So that's another, so 5 plus 15 is 20. Then you get, which already has equaled basically the amount of inflow we're getting from the TV deal. Okay. Then you add on however much money you need to offset to buy out the coordinators, which let's just assume it's around $6 million, right? So 3 mil each on each side. So that's $26 million. And then you need about $10 million to probably buy out the next head coach that you're bringing in. And the reason and 10 million is a low ball because I'm going with Tosh's contract at Oregon, and he makes 1.9 million a year with a 3-year extension that he just started this year. So and he's fully guaranteed. So that's $6 million that you would need just to buy him out. And then on top of whatever coordinators he decides to bring, and you need to buy them out. On top of that comes the new House settlement.
Hold on. Before we go there.
Okay.
On the buyout specific stuff, is there explicit buyout language in that contract?
For who?
For Tosh?
Most contracts that are for those types of coordinators are 100% buyouts if he's the one leaving. Like him leaving and them terminating the contract is pretty much the same language. And it'll be the same across all. It's the same in Wilcox's contract too. If we're getting rid of him, we got to pay him 100% of it. If he's leaving, he has to pay 100% of it, which ultimately is going to come from the place that he's leaving to. So that's just how the contract is. So yeah. And then the house settlement thing is the big issue here, because the house settlement now is basically telling universities you need about $20 to $22 million to give to the players as part of the house settlement, and that kicks in next year. So that's another big chunk of money that you're going to need to find, which also increases apparently every year with about 4% increase. So that's close to what was the math? About $50 million ish, give or take, that you need to find. Granted, of course, there's payment plans that you're going to do all that. So let's say we remove some of the payment plan stuff, like the buyout to Wilcox, you kind of offset. And then also, if he finds a job, then that gets offset off the buyout, all that stuff. So let's just remove, let's say like 20 million off of that as deferred payment plans. You're still needing to find $30 million somewhere. And there's a lot of where that can come from. It can come from the university help, which the university is already helping with in terms of the debt that's tied to the stadium. So I don't know what more you can pull out of there. That's, Rich Lions has to figure out how to balance those books and those numbers. But then the flip side of that argument, or the other way you get money is through the donors. But then, as I said earlier, there's that tie-in with the whole Knowlton thing of, certain donors not willing to give money to the program because Knowlton is still in charge. So it's this like whole big game of chicken that's like, who's going to blink first, right? Is it the donors that are just going to be like, you know what, screw it, I'll give you the $5 million to get rid of him, let's restart this whole thing and let's go from there? Or is it Lions that basically says, like, I'll get rid of him, like, help us get a new coach? Like, but I don't know who blinks first. I don't know if that blink even happens this year. So like there's just a lot there that needs to be settled above Justin Wilcox before it even gets to the football aspect of it.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
All right, we're back. Okay, so Rob, I did look it up. And I am prepared to refute some of these.
Sure, go ahead.
And then I'm going to turn it over to Josh as he's smiling over there. So it did strike me as a little bit odd that a coordinator would have a buyout clause that would effectively function the same as the head coach. And Lupoi's contract is not the same as a head coach. So if he were to leave UO by the end of Feb 2024, which obviously he has not, he'd owe 25% of his annual salary as a buyout. So it's not the total contract value, it's just an annual salary. And if he were to do so to become an FBS or head, FBS NFL head coach or NFL defensive coordinator with play calling duties, then he wouldn't owe anything.
Even better for us then.
In theory, right? In theory. I think that a lot of people have this idea that somehow Knowlton is unable or has an innate inability to hire another head coach. And I don't totally understand that, because I feel like what happened with basketball was our collective department and donors came together and said, we're not going to let you make this hire on your own. Like the last time you went out, you hired your little search committee and you went out and you made the hire. with Mark Fox, and it was a train wreck. And we're not going to let you do it again. So this idea that Knowlton is somehow going to be given carte blanche to go out and find his next NFL, coach for Cal, that's just not going to happen. There's just no way. The trust is already gone. And there will be a lot of people involved in that process. The other piece of it too is the same way, and I was thinking about this and was actually going to save it for our pod, but it was the same way that when we went out and got our offensive coordinator, who ended up becoming Spavital, our donors were very involved in that search and saying, we're not going to let Wilcox go out and hire another offensive coordinator and not have it work out. And then what happened, which was weird and even weirder as the season has gone on, is for some reason, we all got super okay with this idea of just letting Blesh take over. And I do realize he was a hot commodity. He might have had competing offers, but have we not learned our competing offer lesson? I mean, how much have we gotten screwed by the Oregon courtship? And when you mentioned that $15 million buyout, that's unheard of. $15 million buyout. I don't know. I think to me, that's as I would expect that number at an SC, but to have it at measly old Cal, it's that's one of Knowlton's finest accomplishments. All this to say, I think it's what you're pointing out, Rob, is essentially effectively an order of operations issue, which is where do you go first? And it also sort of comes from this idea that everything is on fire. But I also think it ignores a lot of what has happened this year. And to Josh's point, how many people were out on this program or not paying attention, and game day came back and showcased something and completely in one day disproved every single negative excuse you've ever heard about why we wouldn't be able to get a premier coach at Cal. I think in everything about that day proved all of those haters or the woe is me Cal fans, whoever it is, completely wrong. And I don't want it to be lost just because we went to a game and I was just feeling empty inside as I was looking out at empty stands with 32,000 and we lose to NC State. Josh, I do want to see, is there anything that you want to touch on there or go into?
Sure. Also, maybe a little bit off topic. A small story from game day morning. 4 a.m. I get there and it's just rocking. It's awesome. Everybody saw the videos of the storming of the castle. The fences are down at midnight, and there's half-eaten breakfast burritos and things on the ground, and somebody comes by me passing out the little gold pom poms, picking up trash. It's Jim Knowlton, and I was so shocked to see him there. Aren't you getting ready to talk to Nick Saban or hang out with Pat McAfee? And he's there doing the heavy lifting, talking to students, talking to alumni. He's word for word, there was some doubt that could Cal, especially after the Florida State loss, bring the fans to this event. He was just the smile on his face, and I'm trying to think of ways to give credit to zoom out from the head coach, zoom out from the director. The game day experience this year has been a step up. I think that the sound system's great. The couple of games that I went to were phenomenal, and I'm trying to give credit in terms of the expectation. The reason we're so disappointed is because there was some momentum in this program, and I think that momentum in sports and different things can be a little overrated at times. But going back to something that Rob said, the positive feedback of maybe getting an 8-4 season, the way that different folks get involved, it just helps with finance, it helps with student athlete wellness, it helps with performance, obviously. And I think that for all the aspects of basketball, when they went 3-29, you sort of happy at that point. Well, what if Justin goes 3-9, for example? Is that where you draw the line? Because it sounds like on the financial end, it's either a lot of money or a little bit less than a lot of money. So trying to separate away from Wilcox in or out, whoever is head coach of this program, Tosh, Ron Rivera, Tony Gonzalez, Oski, you name it, just trying to focus on what the messaging has to be moving forward to change this. We're watching the same October for the 8th year in a row. It's got to get away from we have to win turnover margin, explosive plays, or whatever they practice and teach. I'm not saying that they're not changing that messaging in terms of day-to-day operations, recruiting, practicing, but something has to continue to change in order for this to end. Because as long as this version of the Cal Bears is here, it's hard to envision getting to 8 wins on average over the course of 5 to 10 years, which gives you a chance. And the ACC isn't that much from the Pac-12. I hate to say it in terms of like the strength of this conference this year. Next year we won't face Clemson and Miami. Like there are good opportunities here. I'm just a little bit skeptical with the current regime and the way that the messaging has been. Something's got to change.
Yeah, I mean, I did have this question for you, which is how much of our current schedule, if you look back on it, Rob and I have debated this, and I've said that the temperature is hotter because of how bad Auburn looks and how bad San Diego State looks and how bad Florida State looks. And I think Nick even covered that in his article today, which is, we made excuses against those teams, even though objectively they look like bad teams with good athletes, but still yet bad teams. And I mean, and every single one of those coaches is on the hot seat right now as well. So, yeah, I guess, I don't know, Josh. I mean, you listed out a few. Is there anyone that, and I realize this, Rob, we're playing fantasy college football right now. And I think that's okay. And I think that's okay because there's definitely a difference between the reality of the situation, which is like what Rob's saying, which is 100% could be the case. There's no potential way out of this. This is what it is, and we have to make adjustments in the margins and not big swing adjustments. But for the time being, because we have Josh on our new segment, Front of the Pod, let's dream a little bit. Where would you go from here if I was Knowlton and I handed you the keys and I said, Josh, take us to eight wins every year. How do you do it?
Yeah, again, just sort of the dreaming 99th percentile. Like we live in a perfect world. We don't live in today's world. It's Chris Peterson for me, and that was once you started asking the question, he's the name that emerged right away. His philosophy, this predates his time with UW and Boise State, is always my priority is to create an environment where everyone else can do their best work. It's easier said than done. It's easier, to put that into practice. I keep talking about this idea of reliable over exciting, and being able to execute the ways. Again, you mentioned the part about, hey, Auburn's Hugh Freeze isn't feeling too good right now, and the wins against Davis and San Diego State aren't as sexy as they once looked. Like having an institution led by someone like Chris Peterson, you just didn't see his teams lose on 28-yard field goals and surrendering 3rd and 20s when the opposing team gives you a chance because of an unsportsmanlike conduct call. Like being able to execute those things just should be automatic. But the fact that a lot of at least the Wilcox era, like for better or worse, like you're scared when there's a major extra point coming up because you've just seen it go wrong in so many different ways. Chris Peterson's the one that I'll let his win-loss record speak for itself. It's phenomenal. The NFL talent he's graduated, so. But the fact that the matter is like you don't always need, and I ask myself every year, who are the NFL players on this Cal team? Clemson has had like some NFL stars, but it hasn't been like a powerhouse. Like Cal in the past has always had the theme of like, maybe not great teams, but they have some awesome NFL players, and they can sure recruit well. They just can't execute while they're on campus. I think that Chris Peterson would bring the best of both worlds. I think that there are folks, California-based and elsewhere, now that it's an all-coast conference, that will want to come to Cal under a Chris Peterson regime. If he wants it or not is a totally different story. But again, we're in the clouds right now, Andy. This is sort of like the home run hit, if you want me to use a baseball analogy in the segment.
I love that. Well, Rob looks like he's ready to punch a wall, so I can't really decide.
If we want to dream, I think that's the right hire. But I have an inkling in my gut that over the next year or two, maybe 3, we're gonna start to see coaches leaving the sport of college football, and we've kind of seen that starting to happen. I think Peterson was the first guy to do it. And then in basketball as well, you see guys like Jay Wright leave Villanova. You see guys like Tony Bennett leave UVA mere weeks before the season starts. And I think it's the NIL. And, Saban kind of alluded to that's part of the reason why he left Alabama as well. And we're going to start to see coaches no longer wanting to be like the old school ones, right? That were literally in this just to coach guys and be a part of college football and develop guys. And I think in basketball as well, I think you're going to see some of those guys start to retire and move on because they just don't have the capacity, and that it's like the NIL stuff is not something that they signed up for from a job perspective. that you're going to start to see those guys move, and then you're going to start to see the young guys that are cool with this and understand that this is the way it's going to be start to move up into those roles. And so if I'm Knowlton, I think I'm looking more at that line. Like I'm looking more at those guys that have been successful with NIL, that have been successful at programs within the last 3 to 4 years using NIL and understand how to navigate that landscape more so than guys that had previous experience. That's probably the route I would go with, the payments coming, NIL being now in-house probably in a couple years too. It's going to be part of the coaching like mantra. Like right now, like Wilcock, you ask him about NIL, right? He's like, yeah, it's like part of our discussion, but we like kind of hand it off to the collective. But like in a few years, it's going to be like he has to handle part of that too. So that's probably that's probably one of the checklists that I'm looking for if we move on from Wilcox at some point.
Rob, that's a great point. And when I mentioned today's world, that's what I was alluding to. It's just in terms of what goes into college football in this day and age, or college athletics, sorry. It's entirely different, and that's sort of what I was alluding to in terms of like that hire doesn't make sense and all the reasons that you listed. In terms of a football perspective and being able to bridge, translating the talent that we do have in that room to be able to win winnable games, that's where I was going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think from a coaching standpoint, it's like, yeah, give me. I mean, we have a picture of Saban wearing a blue and gold tie. Why not give him the call? But yeah, I think those guys are leaving. I think those guys are moving on for a specific reason. So. Yeah.
Pat McAfee is special teams coordinator. Make it happen.
Oh, good God.
Oh my gosh. I will say that I think we have this idea, and it seems it's so common right now in college sports where everyone's looking at this problem and saying these coaches they just want to coach. They don't want to deal with all of these other things. I can easily see a world in which you start looking at this as more of a professional organization. You bring in somebody to be a GM. They would oversee all of the NIL stuff. And then you have a coach that's more focused on actually executing the plays. And so that it doesn't have to, like right now, we're just asking a lot of these guys to wear two hats at once and saying, hey, it's the way of life. Like you got to do it. I think eventually the way that Arizona State tried to structure it with Herm, CEO, and that will start being much more common as this goes in-house too, I will say. So really interesting to see if that can keep maybe some coaches that would otherwise say, hey, I don't want to be involved in the free agency aspect or negotiating any of these deals, or players like at UNLV that are like, I didn't get what I was supposed to, and I'm going to just transfer out. It's a wild world out there. Okay, Josh, as we wrap, what do you want to leave the fans with?
I'll start off by saying, I know the famous one is Adrian Wojnarowski taking over the St. Bonnie's program. And Rob, Avi, Nam, Andy, like any of you guys would, listen, I know there's a lot of moving parts with that, but you guys would make a great, whether it's a director of ops or director of whatever Wilcox needs. I think that you guys would be fantastic role. It would be fun. No, I'll just leave everybody with disappointing October. But what disappointment means that you had high hopes in the first place. And I do want to give credit to Justin Wilcox for being someone that has always said, it starts with me. And maybe it hasn't worked, and just the ins and outs of behind the scenes, getting to deal with COVID halfway through this tenure, he does take responsibility in terms of it starts with me. So he owns this in terms of the 5-7s and the 6-6 when we lose in the Independence Bowl, and oh yay, look, we won the Red Box Bowl. All of that to say, I expect change, I expect better. My expectations are higher. I'll be out on the East Coast, being California East at this point moving forward. But bottom line, appreciate you guys bringing me back on. I think the last time I listened to one of your pods, to be frank, was Bus 2, coming back from Notre Dame when I fell asleep and woke up in a different time zone. So it's really good to connect with. Again, just the excitement around the program literally brought me back from I'm going to watch the games, pay attention, but I hadn't seen Justice and Jasper and any of my friends for a couple of years, and we just all bonded over this craziness that was the algorithm, and I'm just grateful that I can reconnect with you guys, and we haven't talked for a couple of years, but it's no time ever passed, so really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on, Josh, our first friend of the pod guest. Again, thank you so much, Josh, and good luck this upcoming baseball season, and go Yankees.
And go Yankees, yes sir. I probably shouldn't have said that.
I hope both teams lose.